Little Fish Island, with its house and small cluster of trees, is the centerpiece of most views of Chester's Back Harbour. When Zoe Vallé Lightfoot bought the property that is now the library in 1903 as a summer home, Little Fish Island was empty, even of trees. Zoe and her husband Alfred were part of a wave of Americans who were buying or building summer homes in Chester. At the bottom left is the roof of her house, which later became the library. As American interest in Chester as a summer getaway grew, Little Fish Island was bought in 1900 by Mildred Hazen Dewey, second wife of the American war hero Admiral George Dewey. Dewey had explored a run for the 1900 Democratic presidential nomination, but he withdrew from the race and endorsed President William McKinley. He was then appointed to serve on the General Board of the United States Navy in Washington. This change of circumstances probably accounted for Mrs. Dewey's sale of the island in 1901 to General Theodore Bingham. General Theodore Bingham had most likely bought Little Fish Island at around the same time Zoe purchased her house. He was, at the time, in charge of all the public buildings and grounds in Washington, D.C., including the White House. Bingham would go on to become police commissioner of New York City from 1906 to 1909. Developing a controversial reputation by shaking up the police force while fighting criminal organizations such as the Black Hand, the precursor to the Mafia. Bingham would have been acquainted with Alfred Lightfoot, as both were on the New York Social Register in 1909 and were members of the Atlantic Yacht Club, shown here. Bingham's wife, Lucille Rutherford, was a prominent member of St. Louis society, as was Zoe. Bingham had the house built on Little Fish, but he lost a leg in an accident and could no longer go on a boat to the island. He had a house built on shore at the corner of South and King Streets that had a wonderful view of the bay, the islands, and the sailing activity that Chester was becoming known for. He called the house Edgerton, named after the ancestral estate of his wife's family in Scotland. Brigadier General Bingham summered in Chester until he died here in 1934. He requested to be buried in St. Augustine's Cemetery, which is located beside the library. Perhaps he chose that place while having a drink with Alfred Lightfoot in the tower that looks down upon it. Bingham sold Little Fish Island to Dr. John Finney, chief surgeon and professor of clinical surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. He later became the first president of the American College of Surgeons.
Stuart Halstead is credited with starting the first modern residency program, and that was at Johns Hopkins. That was around 1890. He hired directly out of residency training a young surgeon to be his program director, and that was J.M.T. Finney. Finney was very much a bedside physician, a great teacher, and he basically was assigned teaching these young surgeons to operate. He wasn't getting paid at Hopkins, and so he began to do his private practice here at Union.
This was an institution that was very small and undeveloped at the time. The Union Protestant Infirmary was just no more than that.
And then it turned to an official hospital, you know, where you could do surgery, take care of patients, put them on the floor. So that's what he did, using the Halstead principle. He brought it to Union Memorial Hospital and, of course, the residency program.
I think it was a fulfillment of his dream to start something and try and create a new institution with the same principles that he was helping with and delivering at Johns Hopkins. The surgical residency program was a natural extension of his interest in education.
And he was on the board of trustees of his alma mater, Princeton University, of which he was most proud. Now, amazingly, when Woodrow Wilson resigned as president of Princeton University to become governor of New Jersey, they didn't know who should succeed him. Woodrow Wilson was such a popular president. They finally offered the job to J.M.T. Finney, a surgeon in Baltimore. This is the article in the New York Times, which verifies that he was offered the presidency of Princeton. Now, he loved and was devoted to Princeton, but he was also devoted to his practice to Hopkins and to Union Memorial Hospital in Baltimore, so eventually turned it down. Now, because of the proximity of Hopkins to Washington, D.C., he became the physician and good friend of Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Warren Harding, and Calvin Coolidge. He actually operated on Theodore Roosevelt's daughter, Alice, in the White House for appendicitis. Dr. Finney believed in taking the whole summer off and getting away from Baltimore far enough so that he couldn't be called back. This is Chester, Nova Scotia, and this little teeny island out there was owned by Dr. Finney. And, of course, there were no cars, no telephones, no nothing. It was a teeny island, just as depicted, with a house on it. And he'd spend the 2 months there. The property is still in the Finney family now. The Finney family is still a very prominent family in Baltimore. And he fished. He loved to fish. This is a picture of him with a catch. He had a schooner that he loved to take people out on. Now, people kept telling him he looked like Teddy Roosevelt. And this is his depiction of the Rough Rider, Teddy Roosevelt. He did bear a remarkable resemblance. This is the Finney home in Baltimore. Still a beautiful, magnificent home. You can't see it, but there are actually 2 lions guarding the front door. Now, he had many prominent patients: H.O. Mencken, John D. Rockefeller, Franklin D. Roosevelt. When he died at age 79, these are some of the words from obituaries: idealistic in his attitudes, unyielding in his principles, selfless, inspiring young men and women, service to patients, the ideal physician. Now, this is a photograph I took of the Finney plot. It's in Churchville, Maryland, which is close to Bel Air. And on his gravestone it says, John Miller Turpin Finney, son of Reverend Ebenezer Dickey and Ann Parker Finney, 1863 during the Civil War to 1942. And it says, who went around doing good.
Even though he was on vacation from Baltimore, Dr. Finney and his wife, who was a nurse, would help locals from Chester and Tancook with medical problems. Boats would circle the island when he was in Chester. Spending summers on Little Fish, Finney could look back on the homes of other summer residents from Baltimore, Boston, St. Louis, and St. Augustine.
I sit here on the sun porch of our summer home on Little Fish, writing this sketch. Nothing could be more delightful than the outlook in every direction. The deep blue color of the water contrasting with the dark green foliage of the islands and mainland with their rocky shores, the cool and refreshing sea breezes blowing in from the ocean, all combine to offer to the tired professional or businessman a haven of rest, where he can recuperate his tired faculties under ideal conditions.
In addition to his work on the library's founding committee, Dr. Finney was invited to speak at the annual library garden parties, known as teas, in the early 1930s. His family was also very involved, his wife donating bookshelves for the library and his daughter, Mary, circulating the petition to accept the gift of the property for the library and chairing the book committee until her marriage in 1934. Dr. Finney died in 1942. The island has remained in the Finney family for generations, until the present day.